It is May 15, 2025, and this is episode 16. I had every intention to make episode 16 about the missing audit, which was the subject of a few episodes ago, because I got some responsive documents to a record request, and it's still a big mystery what exactly went on, but there was a final audit that was issued. It was just not publicized, and but there's a lot of questions about how all that worked, and I was going to talk about that, but something else came to my attention that I thought I would talk about real quick, and that is an audit of the city's vehicle purchase and replacement program or operations or efforts. The internal audit manager actually did a audit and issued a report in January of 2024, which is very relevant to what happened during Winter Storm Blair in January of 2025. So if you remember, that was a colossal cluster with respect to the city's response to that snow. There were something like, this was a couple, 3 days after the snow stopped. There were something still like 600 streets that had not been plowed, and 20 snow plows broke down, and the snow plows are still using paper maps and assignment sheets and things like that. But it was not good, and everybody said, yeah, it was a big problem. But this audit report shows that they knew or should have known that they had a problem to begin with. And so I was looking around for something that would put a number on the vehicle status or vehicle replacement status deficit, because I've been talking about three deficits that we know about, and that there are probably more out there. But we had the pension deficit, which is in the area of more than 800 million. It's like 800, I've seen 824, 842. It's something in that ballpark. And that's not even the total liability. That's just the level of liability. We got to get it up to like 80%, which is I guess a standard for pension funds. I don't know. But anyway, we're 820 to 840 in the hole for our pension. We've got to bring it up to that number in the next 20 years, I believe. I think it's 2045. So that's 840, let's say. Then you have the infamous $400 million in deferred infrastructure maintenance that fluctuated between $400 million and $500 million during the railway campaign to sell the railway. And nobody's ever produced a list that totals $400 million worth of deferred maintenance. But that was the second deficit. And then the third deficit was this fleet issue that came to light after Winter Storm Blair. And I was trying to find a number that I could use for that deficit. And this report has that number. It actually has a chart. I don't know if you can see it, or it actually has a chart. Well, here's the report. It says vehicle purchase and replacement audit, January 2024. And then it includes a table, if I can get it on camera here. I don't know if it's, anyway, it has this list of 12 vehicle categories, the number of out-of-life cycle vehicles in that category, and then what the projected replacement cost would be. And there are 685 vehicles in the city's fleet that are out of life cycle, and that is based on some equation they had where you take the mileage, you take the age, you take, these other various measurements, and you come up with what a life cycle is and whether or not these folks or these trucks are still within that life cycle. And these 685 are out of that life cycle, and that's about 50%, almost 50% of the fleet is out of life cycle. So the big categories are specialized large vehicles, which are probably your snowplows and other large vehicles like that. There's 145 out of life cycle with a cost of $16 million to replace. The next big category is pickup trucks. There's 116 out of life cycle. Replacement cost would be $6.5 million. There's 140 emergency response vehicles out of life cycle. Cost to replace would be $7.7 million. So the total cost for 685 out of life cycle vehicles is $82.7 million. So 840 pension liability, $400 million deferred maintenance deficit, and $82 million in our out of life cycle vehicles to replace our out of life cycle vehicles. So that's about $1.3 billion. And then that's just to get up to speed. And meanwhile, all these other vehicles are becoming aged and out of life cycle as well. Anyway, so that's $1.3 billion, and that's not including our debt. Our debt is, I think, $550 million that we've borrowed, somewhere in that ballpark. $550 million that we've borrowed over the years that we are paying debt service on every year. So this year, that debt service was the budget anyway, was $130 million. And the year before, in 2024, it was $140 million. So, and it doesn't seem like the city council really gives a whiff about it. They just keep spending this money on all this other stuff. And meanwhile, we have these big deficits and we have this debt, but we just keep spending and spending and spending. And I just don't, well, I get it, but I don't agree with it. But this audit report, I've been somewhat critical of the internal audit manager, not her personally, but the operation, mainly because they're not exercising the authority and the independence that the municipal code gives them. But in this particular audit, she let them have it. So it was a target-rich environment is what we used to call these things. But she has 12 findings. The first one I kind of told you about, which was 45.8% of the fleet is out of life cycle. 2, Fleet Anywhere, which is a software application that they use to manage the fleet. It says Fleet Anywhere is a useful asset management tool, but is not being utilized to its fullest potential. So they probably paid out the you-know-what for this software, and we're really not using its full capacity. Number 3, fleet data is not kept up to date. That's incredible. Number 4, equally, fleet utilization is not being tracked. They don't even know how much they use each of these vehicles, I guess. I don't know. Number 5, preventive maintenance schedules are not enforced, and there are limitations with exporting Fleet Anywhere data. I mean, my goodness. 6, key performance indicators need to be expanded. I don't remember what they said about that one. 7, policies and procedures need to be updated, expanded, and documented to reflect current operating procedures. They ought to just say need to start over. Number 8, interdepartmental communications need to be strengthened. These are all so understated, so much so that, I mean, I've probably written findings like that, but if it's a serious findings, you can't be gentle about it. You got to hit them between the eyes so that they know that it's a serious thing. You really have to, you can't be gentle on some of these things. Anyway, 9 is lack of established and documented succession planning for key personnel roles. They reported back during the audit, which probably would have been in 2023, that they were losing people, that they were losing, they had already lost 4 people and they were losing more. So, and it's probably been that way for a long time. Number 10, a more proactive fleet acquisition process needs to be developed. I would say so. 11, the Automotive Equipment Advisory Committee needs to be restructured and actively involved. So apparently the City Council passed an ordinance that established this Automotive Equipment Advisory Committee. I can't really remember exactly what it was supposed to do, but there was each department that had a vehicle, that has vehicles, had a fleet liaison. So the Fleet Services Division had a point of contact in each department for fleet management matters. And so this advisory group was a committee, so to speak, of all the fleet liaisons as well as the Fleet Services Division, a communication, group type of situation. And apparently, according to the audit report, people just weren't interested and they stopped coming to the meetings, and eventually nobody was showing up to the meetings, and now it's just like died on the vine. So the auditor thinks they ought to get that going back, restructured and actively involved again. And then number 12, separate requisitions are made by each department for similar vehicles. And I think they noted one case where 2 separate departments came at the same time to buy the same type of cars in 2 different procurements, rather than combine the procurements and get maybe a better price or whatever. So, but I must say that most of the audit reports that I've read, they're all kind of cookie cutter. This one was kind of a cookie cutter report, but I've not seen any of them that are like 20 pages. This was like 20 pages long, and I haven't seen any that had 12 findings like this. So it was a big deal for this audit manager, or this internal audit group. But like I said, no, they weren't paying attention. They didn't pay attention to what they were being told. I wonder whether they even read these reports. When I was still working, I used to say frequently that the only time people read Inspector General reports are after the you-know-what has hit the fan, and everybody wants to go back and see who they can blame for what went wrong. And in this case, I think there's a lot to go around with that fleet maintenance or fleet management. They were warned back in January 24 that they had a disaster on their hands with respect to fleet maintenance. So they should have gone in there and prioritized which vehicles they needed to get to the top of the procurement list, and how much that is. They should have figured that out like right away. We need this many fire trucks. We need this many, snow plows, or whatever the case may be. They should have done an inventory to see what they needed to do and what they needed to buy. Apparently they didn't do any of that. So as a result, the people in Matt Adams this past January were trapped in their houses for a week. I tell you what, this city council They're out there changing everybody's property rights and who can build what where, and kissing the you-know-what of every developer that comes to town. Meanwhile, our basic services and basic obligations like our pension to our city employees, who really cares? We're going to be out of council, and it's going to be somebody else's problem. That's what's really the problem here, is that there's no responsibility on the part of these council to look out for the years in advance. And they think, oh yeah, we're going to increase our contribution by $1 million or whatever. They're just waiting for the right time to go ahead and regionalize that waterworks like the Cincinnati Future Commission wants them to do, and then take that money, and I'm sure they're going to use it very wisely to bring down that pension liability. Oh yes. So we all know how it works, and I just think it's time that the city prioritize their spending. Do you want emergency vehicles that operate sufficiently, or public service vehicles that operate when they need to? Or do you want to become carbon neutral, the city to become carbon neutral by 2050? To me, it's not a choice. Anyway, that's enough about our vehicle purchase and replacement audit, but it is a good example of where this city is failing on the job. And I shouldn't just limit it to the council. It's the mayor and the city manager as well. This report went to the city manager. In fact, she probably asked for it, because their process is that the audit manager and the city manager get together to put together an audit plan. So she probably thought it was a good idea, and then she gets the report and they don't do anything about it. Anyway, that's enough of that. And next time we're going to look into that Crow audit report and see if there's anything more clear about the mystery here.